Hi, everyone, and welcome to Be True, my podcast about the writing I love and the writing I do. I promise I won't rhyme the whole time. I'm John Tessitore, and today we limited our liability, a section from my little book, My City of Yesterday. You can find My City of Yesterday and all of my work at johntessitore.com. I say this every time I mention it, but I really love My City of Yesterday. It's a strange thing for me to say about my own work. I like to be more negative than that. And I've gotten pretty good at letting my poems go now, holding my writing tightly right up until the point that it's published, and then setting it free. Next! That took a very long time to learn. That once a poem is published, it's not mine anymore. That an audience can accept or reject it, but one way or another it's no longer about me once it's read. But for some reason, My City of Yesterday is a little different. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's because it draws so much from my life and experience, my writing, my reading, my interest in different forms and literary devices. It definitely helps that it includes some really wonderful artwork by my friends Ted Randler and Pete Shorney. And I think it helps that it's both really small and focused and really expansive. It borrows heavily from James Joyce and Ulysses, obviously, as an extended heroic metaphor applied to the life of a middle-aged man in the American suburbs. And therefore it borrows from Homer and from the Odyssey. But it also includes references to dozens of other literary and historical figures, real and fictional, all showing up at different points, from Daedalus and Petrarch to Groucho Marx to my own friends and family. The section I'm about to read, We Limited Our Liability, is based on the biblical story of Jonah, one of many nautical sources for the vague journey and redemption plotline of this little book. The Book of Jonah is a wild story. It may even be a little funny, which is not a common feature of Bible stories. Here's most of the plot for those of you who don't remember it. God asks the prophet Jonah to enter the ancient city of Nineveh in modern-day Iraq to preach against the wickedness he finds there and to predict its demise. But Jonah tries to avoid his calling. He says later that he suspected God's intentions, but that's not particularly clear early in the narrative. In the narrative, Jonah just takes off, leaves by boat for Tarshish, possibly in modern-day Spain. That's right. Jonah tries to escape God by boat. Brilliant. Godless Spain. During his flight, God calls down a storm on Jonah's ship, and the sailors throw Jonah overboard to save themselves, which makes sense, even to Jonah. But God saves him by sending a giant fish, often called a whale, to swallow him. Jonah remains in the belly of the fish for 3 days and nights. While inside, he offers a prayer that begins, "Out of my distress, I called to the Lord." And then he's spit back upon the land. When Jonah finally reaches Nineveh, an even more surprising thing happens. He is successful in his ministry. The city repents its wickedness, and God spares Nineveh, which he almost never does. And Jonah flies into a rage. All of this trouble, and wicked Nineveh isn't destroyed? This is when Jonah tells God that he knew all along that the whole errand would be useless. And God asks Jonah, "Have you reason to be angry?" And Jonah answers, "I have reason to be angry enough to die." There's a short little episode at the very end about a plant, but I don't have to go into that. Ultimately, the book of Jonah is primarily a story about Jonah's hubris, his self-righteousness. He second-guesses God's intentions, and he proves himself willing to destroy an entire civilization in his arrogance about what is right and what is wrong. Editor's note, this is not an uncommon occurrence in human history, past or present. And the book ends with God scolding Jonah for being so willing to condemn others. But it's also a story about Jonah's frustration with the world as it is. Think about it. Even Nineveh agrees that it's been wicked, and yet it remains unscathed, even after Jonah's ordeal. My little poem takes up both sides of this conclusion. We limited our liability, made our money, grew grim. Now I sing my hymn to the watery parts of the world. Out of my distress, my call from deep inside the heart of the sea, where I have waited long enough to see the fiction in our story, and hear a distant, drowning cry of responsibility. Have you reason to be angry? Yes, my lord, definitely. Down I go to the root of the problem, the abysmal mountain, and try again. I ask for reason, never more. Then ride the mighty whale that swallowed me whole, until it spits me upon the shore. Okay, so as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that's your poem now. It means exactly what you think it means, whatever that is. The danger of doing a podcast like this is that it seems as if I'm trying to give you the answer to some poetic puzzle each week, but that is not my interest. In fact, I prefer to hear how others understand my writing. That always fascinates me more than my own intentions. In these podcasts, what I'm trying to do is create entirely new things. Not true interpretations or right answers, but new essays based on my poems. Look at it this way. I own my poems, so they're very convenient starting points for me. And in this case, the key to the poem, for me, is not the story of Jonah, but the first 3 lines. We limited our liability, made our money, grew grim. If you think about it, those 3 lines define our lives. They define them economically, and insofar as economics drive everything else, they define us morally and ethically as well. They're the basis of the whole system. Limited liability. The legal fiction that we may not be responsible for our actions. This fiction drives our entire society. It's the very definition of a corporation, which is a legal entity that relieves individual shareholders of personal responsibility for the actions of the business. So, for example, if you own shares of ExxonMobil stock, you can't be sued as an individual when an oil tanker spills all over Alaska. You might lose the value of your stock, but you'll keep your house. That's the engine of the system, to make it easy for people to invest and then profit by removing as much personal risk as possible, and with risk, any sense of accountability. And since that's the engine of capitalism, it's the engine of suburban life. And one of the secondary themes of My City of Yesterday, how we, as individuals, are stuck in that particular system and how we have such limited power to change anything as a result. We might try to escape by sea, for example. We might learn to see the fiction in our story. We might even try to take some responsibility for the world around us. But when we're spit out by the whale and we stand on the shore again, we're exactly where we were before. That's infuriating. And frankly, it should be. Which is not to say that there's absolutely no hope in My City of Yesterday or in our actual lives. There are lessons to learn. It is precisely because he fails to learn any lessons at all that Jonah is berated by God at the end of his story. But there is a kind of frustration in his story too, and in our suburban lives as well. And that seems inescapable. How we're always called to serve someone, forced to do things we may not want to do, try to do the right thing within our limited capabilities. We may even succeed, sometimes at great cost to ourselves, and still end up with very questionable results. Nineveh repents for now. ExxonMobil repents for now. And they both live to destroy another day. And somehow we help them to do it. Have you reason to be angry? Yes, my lord, definitely. Yet I must not be giving up entirely because I'm still writing about it and still podcasting about it and because I'm still angry. And if I'm still angry, I must not have surrendered completely. And so, in the hope that you hold on to your righteous anger and never surrender completely, this is John Tessitore concluding another installment of Be True. If you've listened this long, thank you. You can find My City of Yesterday and all of my work at johntessitore.com. But first, go read the book of Jonah. It's really short, couple of pages. It's really crazy. So crazy that for once, you find yourself cheering for God. Special thanks to me for today's theme music, which I call B Chord. Maybe we'll talk again. And if you enjoyed this little podcast, leave some stars or a review and tell your friends. In the meantime, I gotta feed the dog. All right, Luna, I'm coming.